Hi, everyone. This is KLMeri.
And this is Soda.
Welcome to 2024. I know it's quite a while since we've, dropped another
Yeah.
podcast, but Soda and I have a fun one today for you. We are going to be talking about, or really ranking, our top 10 episodes from Star Trek shows that are not the original series in the animated series.
Yeah. I had a lot of fun doing this. I spent like a few good hours just racking my brains and looking up episodes because, there are so many. I'm not sure even how many there are. Like, I'm thinking almost 1,000, right?
Probably.
Yeah.
I was nervous about this because I know I've not seen as many shows as you have. Um and I know that's not a prerequisite for this, but
Yeah.
I was thinking, do I remember enough about some of the shows like Voyager, for example, that I don't typically go back and rewatch? Um, so when I was thinking about my list, like you, I went to each show, kind of started with the Next Generation and worked my way through the list, looking at episodes, really in my mind, thinking about, well, what was a good episode, but also what episodes have I seen more than once because I like them so much.
Yeah, I totally get this. I mean, it's also kind of difficult because when we do ranking in general and episodes
Yeah.
ranking specifically, what is the definition of a good episode? Because there is an objectively good episode, a favorite episode, which may not be an objectively good episode, or a good Star Trek episode, which also may not be, the best episode, but it's the best in the context of Star Trek, the best episode. So
I mean, yes. Yes. What are our definitions even for this ranking, right? Um
yeah,
I put what I thought was a good Star Trek episode to me. It's kind of, to be honest, it's probably kind of in the vein of, what classic Star Trek is from the original series, the elements of Star Trek that we know and love. And also
hmm,
just a mix of what I also enjoyed. Um, so as I
yeah.
started making the list, it got really long. I was surprised. I honestly, I was nervous because I didn't think, like, am I going to have, I knew I would have a 10, but how many more would I have to kind of like sort through them and rank them? And it just kept getting longer and longer. And I thought, okay, I have to stop at some
Yeah,
point, and then had to
I totally get
cull them
it.
back
Yeah.
down. And what's on the top of the list because it's a good Star Trek episode, or is it on the top of the list because I just love it so much? So we have a mix. I'm gonna warn you.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, I first of all, I came from the perspective of like if I don't really remember an episode, then it probably doesn't belong on the list, right? Because if I don't even like it enough to remember it as
Yeah.
much, it probably shouldn't be on the list. But I too went with the like, what's the best episode in the context of Star Trek,
Mm.
which may not be like the best technical episode, and isn't always my favorite episodes. A lot of my favorite episodes kind of got left out because I know that they're not objectively good episodes. But I think I got a pretty good mix of several shows and several themes that I really like.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, this is
Um,
going to be fun because maybe there are some on my list that are your favorites and you just didn't put them on yours because to you maybe they weren't technically meeting all the technical things that you were kind of looking for or carrying the themes that would have made it to your list.
yeah, maybe.
You're going to be shocked by some of mine, I can already tell.
Yeah. Well, I think one show that will not be on my list is, well, the show I didn't watch, which is Prodigy. I didn't watch any of it, so I can't put any episode on this list.
Okay.
Um, and Picard too, because I did watch it, but I did not like it. None of the episodes are good enough to make it to the list. I'm sorry to say.
Hmm.
Um, And the third show that will not be on my list is Strange New Worlds, for the simple reason that it doesn't really have a lot of episodes, and I just didn't find any. It only has 2 seasons and 20 episodes, so I didn't really find among them an episode that is worthy of it. But there are a lot of good episodes there. Just, compared to the other shows, it just doesn't have as much meat to it.
Those are all fair and valid reasons to leave shows off your list. If we're talking about what's not on mine, Prodigy is not. I have watched half of it, but for me, it never prompted me to go back and rewatch it. So it's not on the list. Picard's not on the list for similar reasons to you. I have seen it, parts of it. Just caveat that.
Yeah.
But what I did see, it never drew me into like fully enjoy it. So I didn't make the list. And then the other one that didn't make my list was Enterprise.
Oh, that's interesting.
I did watch most of Enterprise. I think there's probably like a few episodes here and there that I skipped, but I never wanted to go back to rewatch it.
I understand that.
And so I did look at the list of episodes, and I did kind of think about, what was good-ish. But ultimately, I ended up liking some of the episodes from the other shows better, and Enterprise sadly did not make the cut.
I totally understand that. Enterprise has a lot of issues. There is an episode of Enterprise on my list, but I had a lot of, I did kind of debate whether to put it in or to put other episodes in. So
yeah, and the other one that's not on my list is Discovery, because I absolutely have not watched enough of it to even be able to say whether I enjoy it or not. Still on the to watch list.
Yeah, that's understandable. Which is a little sad, It's well, it turns out that the current season is the last season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we are going to start from the bottom up, right?
Yeah, so let's start with number 10. Would you like me to go first, Soda?
Yes.
Okay. Please don't laugh. Sins of the Father, episode from The Next Generation, season 3. I love a Klingon episode. I'm not going to lie.
Can you remind us what the episode is about?
Yeah. So this is the episode where Worf, who's, part of Picard's crew, is contacted that his father is posthumously being charged with treason.
Oh, right. I remember that one.
His brother, who he's, or really half-brother, who he's not met, Kern, he's not met him before, and so this is the first time he meets his brother, and, Worf decides he's going to go defend his father's honor to the Klingon Council. Picard tags along because he thinks there could be particular implications but with, the Klingons and the alliance with the Federation.
Yeah.
This is the kind of episode where we really get to see a lot more of, like, just all Klingons, Klingon culture, the clans that they have, the way that, they really kind of spit on Worf.
Yeah.
And it's really sort of trying to figure out what really happened regarding the betrayal of Kittamar that led to, other house, if you will, claiming that, his father's the one who betrayed them in that battle.
Yeah.
So, long story short, the truth is uncovered that it was, the people who were trying to get his father declared a traitor are kind of actually the people who were behind the betrayal. But ultimately, Worf he allows them to officially mark his father as a traitor in their history. And so Worf essentially, accepts, like, what's considered like a decommendation from the Klingon alliance, and kind of has to in their eyes, do the walk of shame away
He
from
sort of
the
exiled,
Klingon
right?
culture. So he accepts that in exchange, really, for them preserving Kern's standing with the family that raised Kern.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a Worf-centric episode, but Worf comes in with like one really strong feeling, and then he leaves doing something else entirely. And it, for me, I think it's sort of a journey for him in deciding what really is honor.
Yeah.
And what matters more than honor, and that's family.
Yeah. I mean, the Klingon drama in the in Next Generation and Deep Space Nine is really good. I like the Klingon episodes; they're always fun. And of course, most of them center around Worf because he's our Klingon point of view character. Yeah, I think it's really fascinating because it starts a journey that kind of ends in Deep Space Nine, I think.
Yeah.
Of
it's so true.
Of Worf kind of trying to preserve what he thinks is the good of the Empire. Until he kind of notices that he sort of abandons all of his principles for the good of the Empire. There is a quote in Late Deep Space Nine, in an episode that I didn't put on the list, but I really like this quote that like he's talking to a character named Ezri Dax, and he's telling her about some more drama that happens among Klingons, and she's like, Worf, if the Klingon Empire can't uphold Klingon values, then it doesn't deserve to keep going. Let it fall. And he doesn't like hearing it, but he admits that it's true.
We talked about this before. Worf is kind of like the Spock of the Next Generation, right?
Yeah.
He's the one who's sort of in between two different worlds, and has to figure out like where does he fit? Who is he? Is he fully Klingon? Can he accept like himself? Can he accept the things that go on in Klingon culture that not necessarily align to what he believes, having and serving the Federation? So anyway, this is a good point. It's just like kind of like the start of his journey, and I love Worf's journey into being the Klingon that he is.
Me too. I love it.
So for me, and honestly, I've seen this episode like 3 times. Just because I love all the growling and the like finger pointing and just basically the high-handedness that you see from the High Council. Because you're like, oh, they're all about honor, but they're all kind of crooked.
Yeah.
And they're no better than any other race.
Exactly. It's like there is the ideal and there is the reality.
Yeah, and the reality is like politics matters.
Yeah.
You have to be able to concede things that matter greatly to you in order to preserve other things that are more important. So it's a good lesson for Worf.
Yeah, and it's fine that you mentioned it because my number 10 episode kind of deals with that too. It's Voyager, Season 4, Episode 23, Living Witness.
Yes.
Is that on your list?
It's not on my list, but it was on the original list.
Yeah. So for those of you who aren't whose memory isn't very good, who haven't seen this episode, basically 700 years after the events of the show Voyager, the Doctor's hologram wakes up in a Kyrian museum. The Kyrian are people who believe that 700 years ago, their then enemy, the Vaskans, allied themselves with Voyager and massacred them. In reality, the Doctor remembers that 700 years ago, Voyager kind of found itself in the middle of a war between the Kyrians and the Vaskans. And the Kyrians kind of mistaken Voyager bartering with the Vaskans for a military alliance, and they barged in with their guns, and the Voyager attacked them back. There was no massacre, and basically the Kyrian and the Veskans kind of base their history on a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And the story kind of revolves around whether it's worth it to kind of shatter this lie that the society is based upon to just reveal the truth, or is it better to just keep the lie and preserve the peace?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a similar theme.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting theme, and I think it's like kind of a quintessential episode of Star Trek where you like take a concept that can only really happen in a sci-fi setting and use it to really explore a really good moral question. And I think this episode is really, really good at it, and it's like one of Roger's best episodes, in my opinion.
I would agree. It's certainly, I think, like within the top 5 episodes of Voyager. I love an episode that stops and makes you think about not just right versus wrong, but how the decision you make impacts everybody else. Like, what are the consequences of that decision?
Exactly.
And that's what Star Trek's really good about. They're really good at.
Yeah, there isn't a really obvious answer here. I mean, the episode does come to a conclusion that the truth is better, but like, if the circumstances were a little bit different, maybe they would have decided to keep the lie, because is it really
Right.
worth it to just kind of settle the score from 700 years ago if there is really peace and everybody is okay with it? Like, Roger doesn't mind, it's not here anymore. The Kyrians and Veskins aren't in contact with Earth, so it's not like it affects anybody.
You raise a good point, because I think we see even in other Star Trek shows, maybe we'll talk about this a little more, but sometimes they make totally opposite decisions.
Yeah. I mean,
Like,
I think,
the theme in an episode is similar to one in another show, and then they flip.
yeah, I mean, it's all about circumstances.
Yeah. It's like, no, we can't do that.
Yeah.
I can think of one in particular, but it's on my list. We'll talk about it.
All right, all right. Well, I guess it's time to move on to number 9.
Okay, so number 9. To me, this is just a classic, not quite a first contact episode, but we don't understand our alien brothers episode.
Okay.
This is from The Next Generation, Darmok,
Oh,
season 6.
oh, that's on my list, but it's higher.
Yeah. I put it on my list because, I mean, this is okay. So let me give you a little synopsis of the episode. Picard and crew are tasked with going to talk to the children of Tama, and hitherto attempts to kind of communicate with this race just leaves the Federation befuddled, because they just can't understand them. They cannot communicate well with them or understand.
They speak.
It's communication barrier at its height.
Yeah, they understand the words, but they don't get the meaning because the
Right. They
Tamarinians,
don't get the meaning. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, they speak in like codes, you can say.
I love this one because it very much reminds me of Arena, because essentially like the captain of the Tamarin ship and Picard end up on this planet, if you will, where they're supposed to rendezvous. And it looks like they're going to be engaged in a one-on-one battle, and it's all due to them just not understanding what the Tamarins are trying to communicate to them, and that miscommunication leads to what Picard assumes is a fight he has to engage with. Except the other captain isn't trying to attack him, and they're just both really frustrated, repeating the same questions over and over. And, eventually, as Riker, who's left on the ship in orbit, is trying to figure out how to get Captain Picard back, and if there is like a reason that these Tamarins are a threat to the ship, and Picard being stuck on the planet.
Yeah.
All throughout this, we have basically like the Captain and Picard camping expertly. Picard just keeps musing to himself, like, what could this mean? Trying to work it out. And eventually there is actually a threat on the planet. And the purpose of them being down there is to like unite together to like defeat this thing. And then sadly the Tamarin captain is killed in the process. But when Picard is able to be pulled back to the ship, to the Enterprise, he's able to actually communicate in the Tamarin's own way of speaking what happened, what the circumstances were on the planet, and everything as well.
Yeah.
But this, I mean, something else I love about this in hindsight is that this leads to us getting an actual, like, Tamarin Starfleet officer in Lower Decks.
Well, years later, but yeah.
Years later, right? Yeah. In hindsight. But I always loved this episode because, one, it made me think of TOS and kind of the two races can't communicate and, you know, think they got to do battle stuck on a planet together. But it just goes to show that you cannot undervalue the ability to communicate with others. It is what the part of what the foundation of the Federation is built on, is being able to understand, comprehend, and actually listen to what others people's viewpoints are, and not to make assumptions. Don't assume they're aggressive just because you can't understand them.
Yeah. I mean, to me, this episode, like I said, I have it on the list and it's ranked higher. And to me, it's the quintessential Star Trek episode. Like, if you told me, go and pick a Star Trek episode to show someone who knows nothing about Star Trek, this is going to be one of those episodes, because you don't need to know anything. It's great story. You immediately get what's going on. You don't need to know the characters beforehand. You don't need to know about any species beforehand. You just you see it, and it's a good episode with a good message, with a good sci-fi concept, with a good everything. Basically, it's a really great episode.
Yep, it is. I mean, I'm actually smiling just thinking about it.
Yeah, and I mean, afterwards you can stop quoting the Temerians because
his eyes wide open.
Exactly.
On the ocean. Okay. Obviously the difference here is this one made it higher on your list, and this one's kind of at the bottom of my list, and you'll probably figure out as we start to climb up in the list that I love sillier episodes more.
I have a few silly episodes.
Spoiler alert!
We're getting to them.
But, of the 1,000-something episodes there are, Soda, I mean, this one certainly deserves to be in a top 10 list.
Absolutely. Okay, so my number 9 episode, it's actually a double feature. And it's the Enterprise premiere, Season 1, Episodes 1 and 2, Broken Bow. So this is going to be long because it's 2 episodes and it's kind of setting the scene for the whole series, so strap in. The year is 2151, and a Klingon ship crashes in Broken Bow, Oklahoma. The Klingon named Klang was chasing and 2 aliens called Soldaban, and he managed to kill them, but then some local farmer wounded him critically. Now, the star of the show, Archer, who is going to be the captain of the Enterprise, which is the first Earth ship that can reach Warp 5, and it can reach Warp 5 because of an engine that Archer's father designed.
Uh-huh.
He was setting up to go to space in this brand new spanking ship, and this kind of interstellar incident kind of raises the alarms. So Starfleet and the Vulcan ambassadors kind of call Archer in, and they have a debate whether to delay the launch of the Enterprise. But Archer kind of convinces Starfleet that he can, use this maiden voyage to deliver the Klingon back to the Klingon homeworld. And he gathers his crew, and we see him recruit a translator and a pilot and his best friend, who is also an engineer. And then the Vulcans demand that he take a Vulcan liaison, T'Pol, who is going to be his second in command. And basically we have this whole story about like T'Pol is kind of hiding things that the Vulcans know they don't want to tell the humans, and we kind of see the tension between the humans and the Vulcans at that time. There are some moments that kind of don't like stand the test of time, like the Deacon Gel kind of scenes. If you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
and if you don't, you can Google them. They're kind of weird. But I think what's interesting about this, they work together. Sullivan trying to get Clan before Clan can be returned to Kronos, the Klingon home world, and Archer and his team kind of encounter new species, also sudden Klingon, Sullivan. They have to work with the Vulcans, who are kind of antagonistic at the time, and they all manage to work together, and it's kind of like, up until Enterprise, we are really used to seeing like humans be these kind of like very savvy in space, right? Like they know a lot of species, they have a lot of protocol, stuff is very organized. But this is the first time we kind of see them, even in the original series, it's kind of formal. But here is the first time it's like it feels really brand new. These are really new things for them. They don't know any of these people, and there is a feeling that the Vulcans who do know more than them aren't really cooperative and aren't giving them the mold of information that they have. But Archer is still kind of managing to, be diplomatic, but also kind of command respect from people like the Klingons, who kind of respond more to power, to force than, words. And I just think that they are doing something very interesting, and I think they did it very well in this kind of series premiere. They don't do it very well in every episode of the show, unfortunately.
Right.
But this premiere is really kind of showed the potential the series had, and I think it's very interesting.
It's a great choice because I did watch Enterprise, and partly the reason I stayed so long and watching is because the premiere was good.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. We get to see what it's like pre-Federation. Humans, Vulcans don't trust each other.
Yeah,
necessarily.
And it could have easily been like very grim, dark, and like boring. Everybody's suspicious of each other. But no, you get a feeling that like they don't trust each other now, but there is a reason why they do it later. There is a reason why humans and Vulcans become friends later.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a good setup for the show.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
And the Star Trek theme of meeting new cultures and understanding them and creating alliances and everything.
Right, and even at a time where it's not the precedent.
Yeah.
We're seeing it before that becomes the norm of first contact with other races, and having this protocol that you follow, right? This is just both sides really kind of flying by the seat of their pants and trying to sort out if there can be an alliance.
Exactly.
Yeah. That was a good choice. Okay, so number 8.
Yeah.
Number 8 is a Voyager episode from season 6 called Blink of an Eye.
Oh yeah.
This is a great episode. So what happens is Voyager gets stuck in the magnetic field around a planet. While they're trying to figure out how they can break away, they realize that the inhabitants of the planet at that point in time are very primitive, and that their time, or we'll call space-time differential, is very different. So what would be minutes on the Voyager could potentially be half a century to a century on the planet for these individuals. And they also recognize, because the Voyager ship is stuck in the magnetic field, they may in fact be causing some reaction to the planet itself. So in reality, what's happening is, to the indigenous people, you get to see that they appear like a new star in the sky, but they're also making the ground quake.
Yeah.
Because they're impacting the magnetic field of the planet. And what I love about this episode is we keep switching between the perspective of actually the indigenous people as they move through the centuries and are viewing this star, if you will, in the sky that when it showed up started causing tremors on their planet and impacting their civilization, and overall their evolution. Yet when you switch back to the ship, it's only been, it's been hardly any time at all. And they're just sitting there playing with their instruments and doing this, that, and the other, and kind of like, oh, we have a chance to observe these people and how their culture like transforms. And what they don't realize is they've actually insinuated themselves into how the civilization transforms because they are affecting the magnetic field, which in turns is causing all these ground tremors and shaking the planet regularly for the next hundreds and hundreds of years. But every time we flip back to the planet, it's, oh, okay, first they're primitive hunter-gatherers, and then suddenly they're in the medieval ages and they're looking at maybe sending up like weather balloons to try to send a message, because people are now like, well, maybe this thing that is part of our mythology is actually more than that. And so you have some, great thinkers of the time who are like, how do we communicate with this star or whatever's up there that they're actually like affecting us, and can they stop? That's the main point. Can they stop? And then we continue to fast forward, so the next time we come around, they've actually are into the industrial age, and they're discovering like building telescopes and these types of things, and they're thinking, oh, well, maybe this is definitely maybe not a god up there. This is probably a ship. Maybe some aliens up there. How do we tell them to stop? Because seriously, they need to stop. And so eventually a message makes its way to the Voyager, and then they realize how they're impacting the way these people evolve, and really just impacting their daily livelihood. And so they kind of have this debate on, should we not contact them because of the Prime Directive, or are we actually already in violation of the Prime Directive, like from the moment we arrived, because we started shaking the ground, causing ground tremors, and they know about us to an extent, and what do we do? So they end up deciding to do to send one person down there to kind of see how things are going. And at what point does this civilization reach the ability to move off of the planet, and can they actually kind of tell them they're sorry, reveal who they are? And they end up sending the doctor. Well, some transporter malfunctions, naturally. The doctor ends up down there for 3 years, the equivalent of 3 years, even though it's been only a matter of minutes on the ship. But ultimately, the civilization advances enough that they're able to come up to actually do space travel in a rocket and find their way to the Voyager. And from there, kind of have to make sure that the interlopers, if you will, from the planet, the now spacefaring interlopers, can sync to their time so they can have a conversation. But ultimately, where they land is this now spacefaring races help to break away from the magnetic field so that they stop impacting them. But also at the same time, they've kind of already inadvertently made first contact.
Yeah.
So to me, this is just a classic. It's a kind of a fun spin on what a Federation ship normally does, which is sometimes they're sent out to do observation of civilizations as they advance, and their directive is to not make contact with them and just observe only. But we almost always see in Star Trek episodes, the observation piece of it gets, in some way or fashion, you end up tripping over that into crossing the line into affecting the culture in some way. And this is just another one of those episodes, but it's even in a sense funnier to me that they just did it by accidentally getting caught on their way passing by the planet.
Yeah, I mean, I that's also an episode for me. I kind of debated between this and Living Witness, which one will be on the list. And I chose Living Witness because to me it was more memorable. But yeah, this is a very good episode. And what I like about it is that usually when we see this this common Star Trek, plot line of like observing a primitive civilization and accidentally affecting it. It's usually done intentionally, actually, but not like they aren't setting up to like intervene. But there's always like this disaster that's going to come, and they have to like have this moral quandary: do we intervene and stop the disaster, or do we just let the disaster happen because that's what's supposed to happen, and this sort of thing. But here it's not that. It's just that like even by observation you can affect something.
Yes.
Even if you don't know you're affecting something, you can affect something. Which is something that does happen in real life, and I think it's a very clever way to do it.
The different Voyager ones that I thought about, I've always liked this one a little more than the others.
Yeah.
Just because I also love the storytelling style. And we don't just see the primitive people as the primitive people. We see them evolving throughout the episode and becoming wiser. In a same way, it's like, speed running through what humans went through.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just really fun to me.
Yeah, I agree. Speaking of first contacts, my episode 8 is Deep Space Nine, season 4, episode 8, Little Green Men.
Ooh.
Yeah. So Quark, which is the Ferengi bar owner on Deep Space Nine, along with his brother Rome and his nephew Nog, take Quark's new ship, which Quark just got from their cousin Gayla. They take it to Earth, where Nog is supposed to join Starfleet Academy. He's going to be the first Ferengi in Starfleet. But of course, Quark isn't just being nice to his nephew. He's also smuggling a volatile and illicit substance called chemosite. And when they arrive at Earth, the ship malfunctions because Gayla is kind of a jerk. And when the ship malfunctions, the chemosite, which is volatile, does something sciencey, and they find themselves crash landed on Earth in 1947 near Roswell, New Mexico.
Naturally.
What they also don't know is that aboard the ship there is another passenger, which is, of course, Constable Odo from the Deep Space Nine station, who was tracking them because he knew Quark was smuggling an illicit substance, because that's what Quark does. And they're all captured by the U.S. military in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. And, of course, they have to escape. This is a silly one. And, from the moment we said we were going to do a list, I knew there has to be a Ferengi episode on my list, for a Deep Space Nine Ferengi episode on my list. Because, first of all, I just love the Ferengi episodes. I think they're great. Some of the best episodes of Deep Space Nine that I personally enjoyed the most. But also, I think that the Ferengi got such an upgrade from the Next Generation to Deep Space Nine. Because in the Next Generation, there were these, like, really, really annoying, like, antagonists that just, when a Ferengi episode in the Next Generation kind of made you groan. In Deep Space Nine, you were in for a laugh, because all of the Ferengi episodes are hilarious. But they also really humanize the Ferengis. They really make them, you consider, Ferengis have, like, their own personalities. They have different things that are important to them. Not all Ferengis are the same. And you usually find at least one Ferengi character that you like in Deep Space Nine, because they are really likable characters. So that's one thing. But another thing about this episode specifically is that I think it's like one of the few episodes where we kind of see humans through the eyes of aliens that are not like, they're not Starfleet, they're not part of any empire or military. They're just like random aliens that encounter humans who don't know what aliens are, and just how they see humans. And I think that's a very fascinating, like, point of view. Because you can see Quark, it's the 1940s, humans are still very capitalist, and Quark is like, wow, they remind me of Ferengis back home. They're all greedy, and they do all kind of weird things for money. So I can just talk with them, but of course the humans aren't exactly like Ferengis. They care about other things, and kind of Quark plays himself. And there are humans who are like nice and have like hopeful vision for the future, which help Quark and his
Yeah.
friends escape. But it's really interesting to me to see this kind of point of view of like humans from the perspective of aliens who are not like part of any hierarchy or something.
Deep Space Nine has a lot of fun episodes. When they do the sort of the time travel, it's great.
Yeah.
This almost made my like honorable mentions.
Mm.
Just because it was Roswell.
Yeah.
A play on that. And of course, who else would the little green men be but the Ferengi?
Yeah.
No, but this is a good one. In a sense, it kind of makes me think about the premiere for Enterprise. And just I know, not in the storytelling itself, but in just the different perceptions that you have about what an alien race is and could be.
Exactly. Like you can
Right.
see, like when Quark is talking to the humans, he's relying on things he learned on the station from the humans in his time, which are also members of Starfleet. So he's like, "Yeah, we know about humans, about like baseball, because Cisco likes baseball."
No, that's really good. So, moving on to number 7, if you want to talk about Ferengi.
Yeah.
This is actually from Lower Decks, season 4. It's Parth Ferengi's Heart Palace. Why did this make my list? Because the thing that Star Trek does well, which in particular Lower Decks, is humor.
Yeah.
If they're not making fun of themselves at some point, and also doing it by taking what is essentially material from other Star Trek shows to bring it into the episode and just make you laugh, then some of what is Star Trek is lost, because humor is a big part of being able to take a dose of like seriousness or storytelling about morality.
Yeah.
But we don't get any of that really in this particular episode, because this is a character-driven episode about really the lower deckers, or the ensigns, kind of into the path of their growing up beyond the lower decks. I think what I love about this episode so much, though, is that it's meant to be just like fun, humorous, because Captain Freeman has basically given an assignment to the ensigns to, or really, I think at this point they're not ensigns, they're junior lieutenants, to go down to the Ferengi home world, because the Ferengi is kind of in negotiations to join the Federation. So Captain Freeman is going to go down there and negotiate with, of course, Rom and Lita, bringing back some past characters that everybody loves.
Yeah.
And then the others are just supposed to be down there and kind of observe the culture and take notes, if you will, on the things that they're doing. But they all, of course, decide to go to what is essentially like a big gambling casino hotel.
Of course.
One of them gets stuck, obsessed with Ferengi television.
Yeah.
Another one, she's having some real, let's just say, problems. Mariner's having some mood swings, if you will, and she's there to meet her actual good friend Quim, but she's just drinking and carousing and getting in a bunch of trouble, and that's even too much for him.
Yeah.
And we know how the Ferengi don't mind getting in some trouble, right? And then you have Rutherford and Tendi, who this is kind of a pivotal moment in their particular relationship, where they're coming in as a fake couple, and it kind of makes it awkward for them and second guess, do they actually like each other as more than just friends? But when you put it all together, it's really at the heart of it about the Ferengi. I mean, I know we're taking it in the context of what all our lower deckers are getting into, but the opportunities to just see more of the Ferengi homeworld is like it's almost like a blessing. Granted, a hilarious one. But for me, it is what Star Trek does well when they want to expound on the culture of a race in a really funny way. Because when we get Ferengi, right, in Deep Space Nine, and we get Quark running his bar, yeah, there are other Ferengi come in occasionally and do it, but you don't ever see them like on their home turf.
Well, we do kind of sometimes go to walks home turf, but I know what you mean. You don't really get to see the entire world.
Yeah, to get to see the entire world. So I just, from that perspective, love this episode. And I like when Star Trek tries to push you out of the normal stage that they've set,
Yeah,
like the ship or the space station, and take you to a home world, but not a brand new home world, like one that is like already embedded in the lore of the
yeah,
franchise.
yeah. And Lower Decks is a really good setting for it because it's
Yeah.
animated. It's easier for them to have like the background and the set pieces because they don't have to actually build the sets.
I've watched this episode twice already, just because I like to look at the wall of lost prophets.
That is great. They have
And
so
also,
many good
Rom and
jokes.
Lita are so hilarious because they, in the negotiations, of course, with Captain Freeman about the treaty or the agreement to join the Federation, naturally they're trying to manipulate the situation.
Of course. Um, yeah, but I do think still Lower Decks is really good at combining this sort of
Yeah,
plot with character development, and like
yeah.
this is part of like you said, Tandy and Rutherford have their whole romantic subplot going on throughout the seasons,
Yeah.
and it's a continuation of that, and also it's a part of like Mariner's story.
Mariner reaching her boiling point, right?
Yeah, in the season, yeah. So it's a really good combination there.
Yeah. There's just, I love all aspects of it.
Yeah, it's definitely
It's
one of
fun
my
to watch.
favorites. Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite Lower Decks episodes. It's not my favorite. My
Yeah.
favorite maybe to the list. I think you can guess which one it is, but we'll
Yeah.
get to it.
And so what's your number 7?
Yeah, my number 7 is The Next Generation, Season 3, Episode 16, The Offspring.
Ooh.
Yeah. So Data invites all of his fellow officers to his lab to introduce a mostly featureless humanoid android that he built, designed on his own, personal design. And he claims, introduces them, this is his offspring, this is his child. A child which he names Lal. He lets Lal choose their appearance, and Lal chooses to become a human girl, or at least look like one, because she's an android. And basically, Data gets to experience parenthood. He kind of imparts his wisdom. He shares his hobbies. He shares his observations. He encourages Lal to, socialize. He encourages her to go out and talk to other people. He lets her go out a bit on her own to do that, and it's very beautiful to see. I think it's really done very well because Data is like this character who is really unlike Spock. Spock always wrestled with his humanity and he didn't really want to be human, but he kind of had to accept there is part human inside of him. That is kind of the opposite, that he really wants to be a human and experience humanity, and he kind of sees parenting as a part of that. And he really does get attached to this child, and this child gets attached to him. But of course, not everything is wonderful. When Starfleet Command kind of gets a whiff that there is another Data, they want to study it, and of course, Lal doesn't want to be taken away, and Data doesn't want her to be taken away from him. And Picard was kind of had a reservation at first about Data having a kid. He kind of is like coming around to it. Is like, no, she's actually his daughter. He is her father. You can't just separate them because you want to. And this kind of scares Lal, and then Lal experiences a malfunction, and she's dying off. She shows the capacity to show emotions, but it's revealed that it's because she's dying. And before she dies, Data does everything to try and save her, but before she dies, she tells him she loves him, and he has to let her go. And it's actually very emotional. It's a very sad ending of the episode. But then Data reveals that, he downloaded all of her memories and experiences to his neural net, so he kind of preserves her existence for himself. It's a really beautiful episode, I think, and a really good exploration, of Star Trek, of what it is to be a human. This kind of theme that is very common in Star Trek.
It's very common in Star Trek.
Yeah.
No, this is a really good episode. In fact, the next one on my list is very similar theme. We can talk about it a little more. Let me go ahead and tell you what my number 6 is, and that is from The Next Generation, right before this episode, The Measure of a Man.
Yeah, it kind of builds on that, yeah.
Yeah. So, and again, this one is following the same theme, but this is the data-centric episode. It's really about Data's agency, right? Like, what are the rights of artificial intelligence? In the beginning of this episode, you basically have like a scientist who shows up to study like Data's brain, and his ulterior motive is actually to like basically download all of Data's memories and then kind of like decommission him, if you will, and take him apart to figure out like how he works. So he's really treating him like not as a person with rights, but as a thing to be dismantled. And so this causes essentially what is like a trial or council hearing to be held to determine what are the rights of AI, of androids, and should they be treated like property versus have agency. And it's a really great episode because it raises that question of, what does it mean to be sentient? How do we define that? Do we always know how to tell when something is sentient, even based on our own, what is the current definition? Like, is that enough? Should you give the benefit of the doubt? And I think one of the things we always see in Star Trek is they encounter things they don't understand and yet try to give them the benefit of the doubt of being sentient. But why are they having then this question of someone like Data, not living organic material, yet has developed, or in a sense has the capacity to develop like a consciousness of his own, even though his parts are mechanical. So obviously, like, unfortunately, Riker's made to represent the opposing side, like the side of the scientist, and then Picard's kind of presiding, and ultimately the decision is that Data is not a thing. And if they were to allow him to be treated like property, and they were able to reproduce essentially like other androids like Data, it could in effect be like treating them like slaves.
Yeah.
That's something that Star Trek always does well, is it always brings back up that moral argument of, do we properly respect the rights of all living things, even when the definition of what a living thing is doesn't seem to apply.
Yeah. This episode is really, really good. It's really interesting. I think it's like often considered the first good episode of The Next Generation. I also, this is one of these episodes that I kind of debated between The Offspring and Measure of Man, because they're very similar theme. I personally went with The Offspring just because it's one of my favorite Next Generation episodes, and I think it kind of focuses more on Data's perspective than The Measures of Man. The Measure of a Man is very much about Picard, I think, and what he thinks about Data. But The Offspring is more, it does touch on the same subject, but it's also more about how Data sees himself, which I think is also interesting.
Yeah. And ultimately should be part of like Data's discovery of who he is.
Yeah.
Because like you said, in The Measure of a Man, it's the technical debate, right?
Yeah.
It's the debate of the creators or the others, the outsiders. How do they view you? Are they willing to give you the rights of a living thing, and to treat you with respect and and how do they deal with you? And then ultimately, once that sort of decision is made, like you're right, the offspring kind of then moves on into how do you feel about yourself?
Yeah.
Do you believe you are becoming something worthy of respect and right?
Yeah, there's this little funny scene when Picard first hear about Lal, so he talks to Data, he's like, why didn't you consult me first? And Data is like, I didn't notice anyone else on the ship consulting you before they have a kid.
Oh.
Yeah. So my number 6 is actually a Discovery episode. Season 3, episode 1, The Hope Is You, part 1. Did you watch this one?
No, I didn't. Tell me all about it.
Okay, so for those who haven't watched Discovery, the first 2 seasons kind of take place as sort of like 10 years before the original series. They're kind of like a prequel show sort of thing. But at the end of season 2, Discovery kind of gains a hold of like this really supercomputer with a lot of like information, and they kind of have to preserve it and keep it from people who want to use it for nefarious reasons. Otherwise, they can destroy the entire universe, basically. So the way Discovery decides to do that is to travel into the future. And in season 3, basically Discovery and Michael Burnham, outside of Discovery, are flung 1,000 years into the future, into the year 3188. Discovery and Michael Burnham are separated, but they're both flung into the same time. And Michael finds herself alone in the future in an unfamiliar environment. She finds herself on a planet where she can actually breathe, so that's a good thing. But there she meets a man called Cleveland Booker, or Book for short, who's something called a courier, and he kind of helps her understand the world that she's in right now. So it turns out that 1,000 years to the future, and about 100 years before Michael gets to the future experienced something called the burn. The burn basically happened just like this one singular event that struck the whole galaxy, where basically all the dilithium, which is basically the fuel that is used in warp engines, all the dilithium became unstable. Ships that were in warp kind of pretty much exploded. Ships that weren't in warp, the dilithium kind of became useless. And there is very few dilithium right now. It's basically very hard to get it, and it's very, very expensive, and it's kind of used now for payment because it's so rare and expensive.
Talk about a life-changing event, though.
But yeah, I mean, Starfleet basically got destroyed because of that.
It imploded from that.
Yeah, I mean, most fleets became destroyed because of that. And worlds became disconnected from the rest of the galaxy. It changed the whole political landscape of the whole universe, basically. Couriers are really people who are willing to, use their ships to, transfer messages and deliver things across the universe, and they, if you can pay them with their lithium, they're doing it for pay. The thing is, everything looks very, very bleak when she learns all of this, because she's like, yes, they saved the future, but this is not the future that you wanted to save. Starfleet is nowhere. The Federation is kind of broken up. People are disconnected from one another because, space travel is very, very, it's kind of a luxury now. You have to afford it. Not everyone can afford it. Everything is different, but like this book guy is kind of looks shady at first, but then he asks her for help, and it turns out that he's also kind of, on top of his job, he's also kind of trying to protect endangered species. He asks her for her help to get a sort of special, like, endangered species of giant predatory worm back to his home world where they're indigenous.
Mm-hmm.
And as a thank you, he helps her, find out what happened to Starfleet. And she finds out that, there is a bit of Starfleet left. Like, Starfleet, that didn't disappear, but it scaled back a lot. They find, like, a Starfleet outpost with a guy whose grandfather was in Starfleet, before the burn. And he says he's been tasked by his father, who's been tasked by his grandfather, to wait for other Starfleet members to show up. And it's like a kind of ends up very hopeful note that there is still hope out there. Starfleet still exists out there. There's still hope to get the universe still connected back together again. And that's what I really like about it. It's like it does what I remember when we talked about the first episodes of Enterprise, where you like. Enterprise kind of could rely on us knowing where the franchise is going, but Discovery is kind of traversing a completely new setting, but it still manages to give you this feeling of there is hope and it's going to be okay, because not all hope is never lost as long as you have hope.
Yeah, I remember watching the first episode of the season where they had been pushed into the future.
Yeah.
My sense was like, oh my God, what happened to the Federation?
Yeah.
Just like them, right? And it seemed really bleak and like there is no future where the Federation survives. But of course, then I watched a little more, and it isn't until later on that you realize that, yeah, they're still there. They're just scattered and seeking to revive their organization.
Yeah. And really, it's the start of the really good, I think, era of Discovery. There's this this Star Trek thing where the two first seasons of most shows are pretty bad, then they kind of find their footing. And I think Discovery is also one of those shows, because I think starting from season 1 and 2, they have good parts, but I think starting from season 3, they become like a really good show.
Okay, it makes me want to go watch it. So
I recommend it.
I'm going to put it on my list.
3, 4, and 5, I think, are very good.
So where are we? Number 5?
Number 5.
Oh. I wouldn't be surprised if this is on your list. This is the Next Generation episode, Lower Decks. Season 7.
It's not on my list, actually, but yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went back and rewatched this after we watched the season finale of the Star Trek Lower Decks show, because I recalled the episode in fuzzy detail. And when we kind of discussed like how that was the inspiration for the actual Lower Decks show, and we talked about that, I was like, let me go rewatch it. And I did, and I really, really appreciated it more, I think.
Yeah.
But this is like the first time we get to see what happens with Starfleet officers who are not the bridge crew. And, some of the commanding officers, on starships or space stations. So this episode is called Lower Decks for a reason. It's because it's about 4 ensigns who were friends, who are up for like personnel evaluations. 2 of them in particular, I think Sam Lavelle and Sito are looking to get potentially promoted. And it's just a really good view into the perception of what ensigns like kind of have to struggle to learn, and how they view themselves and others view them in relation to being juniors as opposed to being like seasoned officers.
Yeah.
They're continually striving to like impress others, to be the best at their jobs. And, they meet a lot of roadblocks or things that they like, standards that they don't necessarily meet, maybe in the eyes of others. And so, but they have mentors along the way. So it's just a great view into how that world is, which of course then played off into like a whole spinoff series.
Yeah.
Where they were able to really take it and run with it. But For this episode in particular, one ensign, Sito, who's a Bajoran, is asked to undertake like a secret mission to accompany essentially what is like a Kardashian operative who has escaped over the border. He's a Federation operative, but he is a Kardashian, to kind of essentially help him like make it back into the fold to continue his mission. And she's going to go along with him as a captive. But unfortunately, as we all know, dangerous missions can lead to death. And so at the end of the episode, she's presumed dead because her escape pod is found in bits,
Yeah.
if you will. And which is a shame because she was like kind of the star ensign of the show, if you will, to be promoted. And this shocks everybody, right? Shocks her friends. Even ensigns may not always be given the same type of dangerous work on a regular basis that some of the commanders are at risk too.
Yeah.
If they choose to put their life on the line, then that's just the risk that they take, and not everybody survives. So it's also a really like grounding in reality for some of the younger officers in Starfleet.
Yeah, I mean, this episode is like, it's really good. And, for a long time before Lower Decks, the series, a lot of people were kind of saying, we would watch an entire series about Lower Decks based on this episode.
Yeah.
And there's a good reason for it, because it's really interesting to see the series for once, not from the perspective of the bridge officers, but from the people who make the entire ship run. The ensigns, basically. Yeah, they don't know much, but they have, they kind of figuring their way out because they're not well seasoned, like you said. Yeah, it's a great episode because it kind of makes you see everything from their perspective. Because usually they're kind of like the disposable characters in the background when an important character from the bridge crew kind of tells them to do something or research something but for once seeing it from their perspective, it's a really good choice to do an episode about and the entire series about.
So in a sense, it's not like your typical adventure episode, like for the bridge crew, with some of the other Star Trek themes in it, but it introduces you to like why everybody who joins Starfleet, they're all important, right?
Yeah.
Whether they're lower decks or the captain. And they're all there for a reason, and that is to serve in Starfleet and uphold the laws and the ideals of the Federation. Like you said, it was a break from tradition and kind of like who we got to follow in the episode, and it was really refreshing at the time. And obviously, having it made into a series of its own later, all about following the lives of ensigns on a starship, paid off.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what is your number 5?
Yeah, my number 5 might be on your list. Deep Space Nine, Season 5, Episode 6, Trials and Tribulations.
It is.
It is, I know it. Yeah, of course. The Defiant, which is the ship that the commander of Deep Space Nine uses when they want to go off the space station. The Defiant is going to Cardassia to retrieve a Bajoran artifact, the Orb of Time. On their way back, they pick up a human passenger, and suddenly the ship is flying 100 years into the past. Turns out their human passenger is Arn Darwin, or whatever he called himself, the Klingon who disguised himself as a human back in the original series episode. Oh God, I forgot. The Tribble episode. You know what I'm talking about.
The Trouble with Tribbles.
The Trouble with Tribbles. Yeah, I can't believe I forgot it. But basically, that is the Klingon who disguised himself as a human and poisoned the tragedy Kelly or whatever the grain was called that killed off all the Tribbles. Basically, this disguised Klingon wants to use the orb of time to go back in time and prevent himself from being caught. And the Deep Space Nine crew has to kind of disguise themselves as people of the time and stop him from doing that without disturbing history. And it's done so well. It's a funny episode. It's a great homage to the original series. And it's just, there's this point at the end, they kind of also draw out comments about, the characters, like, you have Jax kind of saying that Spock is really hot because, it's Spock. And at the end of the episode, there's like this really, really beautiful moment of Cisco getting to like, share like a small exchange with Kirk. And he's like really, it's like a very beautiful moment. And, hilarity ensues. That's the episode. Hilarity ensues. They're in the past and hilarity ensues. And it's great.
I love this episode so much.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. Probably even before I started watching Deep Space Nine more regularly, I had finished the original series. I did a couple of rewatches, and I was like, oh, I know people probably have referenced some of the original series material in later shows. And sure enough, a Google search is like the first thing was trials and tribulations. So I had to go watch it. So it's really actually the first Deep Space Nine episode I ever watched. It has a special place in my heart. I just love the way they cut the original footage.
They do it so well. With
the Deep Space Nine characters, and just, they make it look like it actually is happening, and just Cisco's face, and then the meta about the Klingons, why they look like that. It's just, when Worf is there, it's so funny. I love it. It's such an ingenious way to, like, bring back probably one of the most beloved episodes or well-known episodes of the original series.
Yeah. I read about this episode. It was done for like the 25th anniversary of the original series. And they, yeah, and they were they wanted to do a homage to a classic episode, and their second choice was actually to do a homage to like the mobster gangster planet episode.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
They actually
just because you said that, the name flew out of my head, but yeah.
Yeah. They want to have an episode where they come back to this planet, and instead of gangsters, now everybody dresses as Starfleet officers and act like a Starfleet officer. But they just had to go with Trials and Tribulations just because, I think it was because the Chamber of Tribbles was just a more popular episode. And they really did a great job.
It was so good. I just love it.
Yeah. And of course, I chose it because it's such a great homage to the Star Trek franchise as a whole, combining, the old school Star Trek with the 90s Star Trek. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we're moving on to number 4?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, let me tell you about this one. Deep Space Nine, Season 6, In the Pale Moonlight.
Oh, yeah.
If there's something I like about Star Trek, we do get, I'll say, darker episodes in different Star Trek series, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But what I typically appreciate about a darker episode is not necessarily, like, the mood lighting or the, like, no-win scenario feeling of despair. It's that you will push somebody to maybe the limit of what they consider ethical behavior and what's moral. Watching somebody, like, step over that line or make a decision that kind of goes against their own personal beliefs, or kind of like stretches them into like a gray area of morality. I love that. I eat that up with a spoon.
I agree. Okay. I completely agree.
So, this is about Cisco and Garrick. Okay. This is basically the point in the Dominion War where the Federation is taking a lot of loss. It's not looking good. And so Cisco's kind of tasked with bringing in the Romulans on the side of the Federation no matter what. he goes to the one person he knows is sly enough and smart enough to help him figure out a way to do this, and that is Garrick.
Yeah.
Garrick is a spy himself. He doesn't think twice about underhanded tactics, and Cisco's just like, I gotta use this guy. He's gonna help me accomplish the end game, which is, prevent this Federation from being taken over by the Dominion.
Yeah.
So ultimately, what they end up doing is creating some fake evidence to convince the Romulans that the Dominion, those in the Dominion, are planning to kind of betray the Romulans and end up taking over Romulus, and in order to bring the Romulans over to the side of the Federation. And what happens is, there's like a lot of subterfuge going on in creating this fake evidence. Even Quark at one point, unfortunately, like gets mixed up in the matter and is told to like stay out of it. You don't talk about what's happening.
Yeah.
But Cisco eventually has the evidence he gives to a Romulan senator, and he's kind of struggling with the possibility that if this discovered that the Federation is giving them fake evidence, I mean, it could all blow up in a monumental way, right?
Yeah.
And Garrick comes in and it kind of essentially saves the day in the sense that he has the Romulan senator like assassinated on the way back to Romulus to report these quote like findings of these fake findings that the Dominion are out to betray Romulus. And Garrick's reasoning is like, look, this is going to be even more convincing to the Romulans when they try to figure out why this guy's ship blew up, that it was the Dominion who did it.
Yeah.
This is going to give them the needed push to join us. And yeah, we had to, get rid of the guy who made the recording and, kill the Romulan senator, but it's all for the greater good, right?
Yeah.
It's what you wanted, right? Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention this whole episode is like in a flashback format. This is like basically Cisco talking about, what happened and how he essentially had to step over to the dark side in order to accomplish like helping the Federation win the war. And he doesn't feel good about it, and that's kind of where you leave it.
Yeah. It's a great episode. Like, if you search top Star Trek episodes ever, it's always on there for a good reason.
Yeah. It's like the antithesis to what you would expect a Starfleet captain to do. Yeah. To uphold, like, the good and to operate with a strong sense of morality and to be ethical. And oftentimes Star Trek likes to they like to flip that around, right? They'll say, well, under the circumstances, what would you do? And here's what, any person would consider doing. Yeah. How they justify themselves, how they justify murder and like bribery and fraud in order to protect what they feel is, if they value more than their own hands being clean.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fantastic episode. Of course, Cisco and Garrick are two of the most like interesting characters in the show. So, of course, having the two of them starring in an episode is like,
yeah,
it's amazing. It's not on my list because, I kind of had a feeling that you have it on it, honestly. And there are other episodes that I personally like more, so I put them in. Yeah. But yeah, it's a fantastic episode.
I just like watching somebody being comfortable in their own skin with what they had to do.
Yeah, it's a great thing to see someone kind of sit with the bad thing they did and like, but they can't like, find another way to make it work. Yeah.
Okay.
So, my episode 4 is The Next Generation once more, season 5, episode 23. Iborg.
Ooh.
Is it on your list?
It's not on my list, no, but that's a good choice.
Yeah, I love this episode. So the Enterprise finds a crashed Borg scout ship that has a sole survivor, a young Borg drone. Picard at first doesn't want, he wants just to leave them be there and like leave, but Dr. Crusher is like, no, we have a duty to help people in need no matter who they are, so they beam the Borg over and help it heal because it's pretty badly wounded. But Picard, he kind of has to be confined to a certain area and not be allowed to work on because Picard still has like lingering trauma from the time he was assimilated to the Borg. While the Borg is healing, while the Borg is healing, Geordi LaForge, who is his chief engineer, and Data kind of get to know him, and they kind of come up with a plan to use him as a sort of like implant a kind of a not exactly a virus, but more like a bug in his brain that can later infect. They can later send him back to the Borg and infect the rest of the Borg with this bug and pretty much end the Borg like that. And of course, Crusher is like, no, that's like literally genocide. And Picard is like,
the opposite of why we'd save this guy.
Yeah, and Picard is like, the Borg are kind of threatening every person they come across, so maybe that's a good thing. But the more the Borg stays and heals, the more Geordi kind of hangs out with it, basically. And they actually become friends, and the Borg starts to develop an individual personality. And it started becoming the question that, most of the Borg drones are assimilated people. They were people. They were individuals that were Borgified, basically. And they can be cured. I mean, Picard was cured. You can see that by talking to this Borg guy, he can also be cured. He can also become an individual again. Is it morally correct to, use him like that and kill off the Borg when they can be saved somehow? Eventually, they decide not to go through this plan, and they offer the Borg, who is like an individual, who chooses the name Hugh. They offer him asylum in the Federation, but he chooses not to take it because he knows that the Borg will come for him. So he chooses to go back to the Borg to save his new friends. And it's kind of left open-ended because maybe his new individuality can also infect the Borg in some way, but instead of destroying them, he might actually help the people there.
Yeah, help them evolve in a sense.
Yeah, in a sense. It's a very good episode because it's the thing, like I said about Little Green Man, and like that you take a species that is basically first presented as like evil and bad, but like there is no evil and bad species. Everybody is people, even those that are very different from you. And it's one of those again, like even the Borg have people in them.
Yeah. Star Trek does do that. I mean, sometimes it's, do we really like them rehabilitating a villain race? But oftentimes they do it in a way that makes them more interesting.
Yeah.
This is just mentioning the Gorn, but when they go the opposite way, I have problems with it sometimes.
Exactly. I also don't like.
Don't downgrade them from a sentient race of people who are good and bad, and then just make them all bad.
Yeah, I really also don't like what they do with the Gorn in Strange New World. I hope maybe they'll kind of turn it around at some point, but
yeah,
I really like it when they do it like with the Borg, or like with the Ferengi, when they take like a species that is presented as like the bad species, and they're like, no, there is no such thing as a bad species.
Right. I mean, it's the same with the Klingons.
Yeah, exactly.
In the original series, they're presented as like the ultimate enemy outside of like the Romulans. The same with the Romulans, and it's more of our societies don't operate by the same ideals.
Exactly.
We're going to get in wars as different people with different ideals tend to do. So, but are they really bad? Are they really evil? No.
Yeah.
So, which is why there's always the hope of like, coming to peaceful terms with them, at least from the standpoint that you don't invade each other.
Exactly.
Kind of like live and let live.
Yeah.
Okay, So my number 3.
Yeah.
This is from Strange New Worlds. These Old Scientists of season 2.
Oh, yeah.
This is kind of a lot like why I picked the Lower Decks, the Ferengi episode, and why I have Trials of Tribulations on my list, because I love a crossover episode.
Yeah.
I love it when the series mix.
Yeah.
And they do that very intentionally here. So we have Boimler and essentially Mariner later on from Lower Decks animated series making their way into to the Enterprise 120 years in the past, which is Captain Pike's Enterprise. Let's just say, things happen.
Yeah.
Boimler goes through a portal. He's super excited to be where he is. All his heroes, not all of them. I mean, he loves Kirk and Spock, right?
Yeah.
But it is the future generations getting to come to the past and kind of fangirl, fanboy over their heroes, the legends of Starfleet and of the Federation. That's really the crux of the episode. I mean, they try to send Boimler back, and instead they get Mariner. And then between Boimler and Mariner, they're just letting slip little pieces of the future every which way. But ultimately, their presence on the Enterprise gives Pike and his crew a sense of, we're doing good. And the work that we do on the Enterprise is meaningful to people in the future. Whether we survive or not, or whatever our personal ends are, our legacy surpasses us and lives on. So it's just fun. It's humorous. We get Mariner bonding with Uhura and telling her, don't be so serious. That's not what you're known for. I mean, Boimler just telling people all kinds of things he shouldn't.
Yeah.
It's great. It's fun. It's hopeful, and it leaves Pike's crew with a sense that they're doing good where they are. So what more could you ask for?
and then it has also this theme that we just talked about, because part of the episode is that Tandy insists that there was a scientist Orion vessel that discovered something, and Boimler and Mariner don't really believe her, and then when they meet the Orion vessel back in the past, they kind of convince the Enterprise crew that don't stereotype all Orions. Some Orions are not just evil pirates that steal things.
Yeah, it's true. That's good, because the Orions, as they're perceived in the original series, is sort of a morally ambiguous race.
Yeah.
At best.
At best.
And yeah. So it's a lot of good mix between future and past.
Yeah. It's a good episode. It's a fun episode. It's probably my favorite.
I like to rewatch it.
Of season 2. It's probably my favorite.
So as you can see, when we get into these top 3, these are episodes I like to watch more than one. So what's your number 3?
I think it's one of probably episode you like too. Lower Decks, season 2, episode 9, Wedge Dudge.
Yes.
Yes. So this episode is it's a very interesting one. It follows 3 different stories of lower deckers. We have Ma, the Klingon lower decker, who serves on a Klingon ship, who discovers that his captain is supplying weapons to the Puckleds. The weapon specifically is a Veruvian bomb. And then we have the lower decker Vulcan, Talene, who serves on a Vulcan ship. And she discovers through emotional intuition that the Packlets are doing experiments with Veruvian bombs, and she doesn't know where to get them from.
Yep.
And we have Boimler, who is the lower decker that we usually follow, of the ship we usually follow is human, and he kind of attempts to find a bridge officer that will be his buddy, bridge buddy.
Oh yeah.
Basically his mentor. A high-ranking officer will be his mentor, and he kind of, all of the stories are about those lower deckers trying to prove themselves to their respective ships, in their ways that apply to their respective cultures. Ma has to be more violent, and Talene has to be more logical, and Boimler has to be less annoying. But basically, it's kind of like those three people from three completely different cultures, but they're still very similar because they want similar things, and it's just kind of a very beautiful way of showing like the similarities on top of the differences.
Yeah.
Like the edicts, the Vulcan edict, infinite diversity and infinite combinations.
Yeah.
I think it's a really beautiful episode, and the best thing about it, like the most mind-blowing thing to me, is that it's only 25 minutes long. They managed to pack all of that in 25 minutes.
Yeah. Lower Decks, full stop, has some really great episodes.
Yeah.
Just because they can do so much without having to do all the other production that comes with the other shows. What I love about this particular episode is we get introduced to these two like lower decker characters from other ships, Klingon and Vulcan, that we'll get to see again.
Yeah.
I know this is kind of like the episode before the finale, so it's playing into the theme of that whole like Pakled subplot that's going on. But I really agree with you. The star of this episode are these ensigns.
Yeah.
Like you don't focus as much on what's going on with the Pakleds at any point in time.
Yeah.
You want to know more about these characters, and that's something that Lower Decks does so well, is character development.
Exactly.
An introduction of new and interesting characters, even in a 25-minute episode. Pulling them out of the woodwork.
Yeah, and even before we knew we were going to see them again, we really enjoyed them because the characters are so strong.
We wanted to see them again, just having seen them that first time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So I love it. I love that this is like in your top 3.
Yeah. So number 2.
Number 2 is Trials and Tribulations.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about it already, but if you haven't seen it, go watch it. Yeah. It doesn't matter whatever else, as long as you watch go watch the original series episode if you haven't seen it, Trouble with Tribbles, and then go watch this episode because they're a pair.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's your number 2?
We also talked about it. It's Darmok.
Yep.
Yeah.
What if we have the same number 1?
Oh, that would be interesting. That would be very interesting. Do you want to say what's your number 1?
Okay, no, let's compare. What series is your number 1 from?
Deep Space Nine.
Oh, mine's from Strange New World.
Oh, so it's not the same number 1. Yeah.
So it's not, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about it. I mean, Strange New Worlds, Season 1, The Serene Squall.
Oh, I love this episode. I just didn't know where to put it. I just thought there were 10 better episodes. I'm sorry.
I picked this one because it is your classic space adventure episode. There's a lot. I mean, of all the miniseries out there, there's so many, but this one in particular gave me very close feels to the original series type of space adventure. It's fun from start to finish. We essentially get the Enterprise encountering what they think are some human traffickers.
Yeah.
They think they have essentially rescued someone who used to be a former kind of like Federation citizen, even maybe in Starfleet briefly, this doctor who is kind of helping these people like on the frontier, if you will, and kind of got caught up in this ship being attacked by essentially like pirates, and these people being like taken captive. She's essentially helping the Enterprise go find the people that are in jeopardy. Plot twist. She's actually luring them into a trap.
Yeah.
So she can take over the Enterprise. What more classic Star Trek adventure could you want? Captain Pike and some of his crew go down to this ship. It's empty. There's some people some pirates in waiting for him. They get captured. And back on the Enterprise, this doctor who has actually gotten kind of close to Spock tricks everybody and kind of takes over the Enterprise because she wants to use it to go break somebody out of jail.
Yes, that's true.
And she turns out she's actually the captain of the pirates. So it was all a ploy to get the Enterprise within her grasp, and then they kind of have to outwit her, and she escapes at the last minute with quite the ego, and you're just like, we'll probably see you again.
Yeah.
Captain Angel.
Yeah. I really enjoy this. I think, you're right, it's very much like old school Star Trek adventures, but it's also kind of updated to the modern Star Trek. It has more action, like from older Star Trek episodes. Like if you think of classic Star Trek episodes, maybe you have like the Kirk style of fighting, Kirk karate. But no, this one is actually some action, and yeah, it's a very good episode. The villain is really fun. Those pirates, the pirates, they're like space pirates, right? They encounter are really fun. Just a very enjoyable episode from start to finish. And of course, it ends with a zinger because it turns out that the person they wanted to free from the prison is Spock's brother, Cybuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a really great episode. I agree.
I love a fun villain. Not like a like dastardly, like evil overlord who's, trying to subjugate a whole planet, or like an evil supercomputer. A pirate captain.
Yeah, and a pirate captain with
being the rogue that she is.
Yeah, well, I mean, she's a pirate captain, and she's also like a follower of Cybuck's Vulcan feeling kind of cult or whatever it is he's doing, right?
Yeah.
But like, they're really.
And she's very charismatic, which always is is one of the qualities of like one of the fun villains, right? Yeah. She makes people like her. She gets Spock to she's like, oh, I get Vulcans. And he's like, oh, somebody you can talk to. Somebody who is understanding like my problems. Even though she is kind of subtly manipulating him, right? With the kind of like, oh, you don't need to be so Vulcan, because obviously she's been learning from Cybox teachings, right? Let's be all free and emotional and give in to our passion, etc., etc.
Turns out they're non-binary. They're a they, not a she.
Okay. Yeah, they. Yeah. I'm sorry, I always forget to say it. But yes, this particular character is a they.
Yeah.
So also updated in that sense.
Yeah. And they're a great villain. They're a lot of fun. It's probably one of my favorite episode of this first season, honestly. It's a lot of fun. My number one episode, Deep Space Nine, Season 6, Episode 13, Far Beyond the Stars. Basically, the Dominion War is raging, Starfleet is kind of losing a lot of people, and Sisko, faced with all of this death and suffering, he contemplates leaving Starfleet. And while he, contemplates it, he's suddenly overtaken by a vision where he's living in 1950s New York as an African-American science fiction writer for a science fiction magazine called Benny Russell. a black writer who creates a story about a black space captain in the far future. And all of the characters we know are basically also people in Benny Russell's life, and it's a lot about his struggle to get the story out and really just live his life as an African American in 1950s New York, um, when everybody wants to kind of curtail his life. They don't want to publish his story because the captain is black in the story. They don't want to publish his picture in the magazine because they don't want the readers to know they're reading a story written by a black person.
Right.
He has to struggle with the police officers who keep harassing him for no reason. And, his girlfriend basically kind of tells him, why do you need all of this headache? Come with me. Let's buy the cafe and run it instead. But he insists on doing it. He insists on spreading the message that there is hope for the future. And it's kind of a very meta episode that reminds me a lot of the original series too, because I think it's kind of like this grand, very meta concept that the original series really like to do. Because he's basically dreaming up the story that we are watching in Deep Space Nine of a black captain in the far future where everybody is equal. And it's
Right.
kind of like, always have hope for a better future. The message
Yeah.
of the story is that you always have to keep fighting for the hope.
I mean, that's what Star Trek is.
Exactly.
It is a 1960s story about far in the future where humanity is moved past moved past most of its prejudices and ability in like fighting amongst each other, and has even gone so far as to accept other races that are not even human. And
Exactly.
I mean, it's a future striving towards peace and unity among all walks of life.
Exactly. And there is like this point where Cisco asks of,
Yeah.
am I the dreamer or the dream?
Yes, I know, that's a great line.
Yeah.
No, that's actually a really good episode. I can see why it's near number one.
Yeah. I think it's just the quintessential what Star Trek is about. It's about the hope for a better future, always, even when things seem really, really bad.
So those are our top 10 episodes. Wow.
Yeah.
We did have 2 in common.
Yeah.
But I like that we were able to cover so many different episodes between the two of us.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that our 2 episodes in common were both number 2 for us.
Yeah, I know.
And I think it's also interesting that a lot of the themes kind of were kind of similar. We started off
They
with
do.
the same theme, kind of. Yeah.
Like The Measure of a Man and The Offspring.
Yeah. Or
us both liking episodes that are about ensigns, like the Lower Deckers.
yeah.
Us both liking your classic like adventure episodes, or your classic like go down to the planet and meet a new race of people episodes.
Yeah, and the political morality stories at the beginning,
Yeah.
the Living Witness and the Clinton story. Yeah,
And just the
Season
funny ones.
Thunder. Yeah,
The homages to the original, right?
yeah, exactly.
So I'm going to tell you one of my honorable mentions. I have a couple on here, but we don't have to talk about all of them. I told you I love Klingons.
Yeah,
So the other Klingon episode I was on my list originally, and I made an honorable mention, was Blood Oath from Deep Space Nine,
yeah.
season 2. This one is an homage, obviously, to the 3 original Klingons from the original series, Kor,
Yeah.
Kolith, and Kang. In their, I'll say, later years.
Yeah,
And it's just a really good episode about Klingons. Kind of in a nutshell, they're out to like get some revenge on, quote, the albino, and they end up kind of pairing up with Jadzia Dax, one of the former, I'd say, hosts that the Dax was in, was I think probably a male, and was considered a brother of the Klingon. So
Yeah.
Jadzia knows Koloth and knows Kor, and kind of partners with them in this little escapade to, track down the albino. But I just watching some senior Klingons just be themselves and like, oh, we don't need to tell you who we are because you know who we are. We're from the original series. You
Yes.
know us. Was great.
It's a really good episode, like the homage, also a good homage to the original series. Yeah.
Yeah. So I lifted out the list because I had like Trials and Tribulations on there, and I also had like the Worf episode.
Yeah.
I have Caves on here from Lower Decks.
Oh yeah.
Because it is a meta on just every cave episode ever where,
Yeah.
you know, the landing party goes down to a planet and gets stuck underground and there's cave people or cave monsters or injuries or they're being trapped. We get all those stories involving caves in that one episode, and I thought it was just an innovative way to do storytelling on such a trope in the Star Trek franchise.
Yeah. I also have quite a few honorable mentions, basically episodes. I couldn't find a way to put them above any of the episodes I did end up choosing. One of them is like Barge of the Dead from Voyager, which is also one of my favorite episodes of Voyager.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Bolana episode. It's about her basically going on kind of a spiritual Klingon journey and talking to her mother. And it sounds funny, but it's actually very touching, I think. I really love this episode, but it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't really hold any particular Star Trek theme. You know, it's like we said at the beginning,
Right.
It's like the tension between what is a good Star Trek episode and just one of our favorite episodes.
Right.
Yeah. Another honorable mentions, there are a lot of Deep Space Nine honorable mentions actually. The more serious ones, because of the three, I have 3 episodes of Deep Space Nine, but 2 of them are very silly, which is funny because Deep Space Nine is not a very silly show.
It's so true.
Yeah. There are a lot of good episodes. The Siege of ARR, I can't remember the number, basically the war episode, which is really, really touching. And really, really heavy. And there is the episodes, a lot of episodes about Kira and her story are very, very heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're very good.
But they're good, like, character building episodes.
Yeah, like the episode where she gets, like, they try to convince her that she's actually a Cardassian spy is a very good one that I like. But again, it's not very theme heavy, it's very character heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in Lower Decks, the episode where they go to Tandy's sister wedding is also one of my favorites.
I thought about that one.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think Soda might put that one on the list.
Almost. It was almost in, but yeah.
Yeah. Strange New Worlds one was Ad Astra per Aspera.
Mm-hmm.
The Una episode, this is your classic like court case episode, right?
Yeah.
Una is on court-martial because it's been found out that she's an Illyrian, and Illyrians are not allowed to join Starfleet, and they're essentially kind of being persecuted. And she's had to hide her identity the whole time and joined Starfleet under false pretenses. And it's a good character episode, but it more so is about even the Federation itself may not be living up to what it proposes as its ideals of like full acceptance and accepting everyone for who they are and being able to give people the benefit of the doubt and not saying one race is worse than others or purely evil, for example. Just because the Illyrians and have genetically enhanced themselves, does that inherently make them wrong?
Yeah.
And so it's really about like Starfleet / the Federation needs to take a step back and look at its own laws and how that causes essentially the persecution of a whole race based on just what they may have instituted a century ago in order to protect themselves from what they perceive to be a threat. It's time for them to take a step back and look at their own selves and reevaluate. Is that live up to who the Federation is today?
Yeah.
So
I agree. Yeah.
I love a self-reflection episode is what it is. It's self-reflection for the organization as a whole.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was a good honorable mention. Obviously, if you want something hilarious from Strange New Worlds, go with like Spock Amok.
Yeah.
Right? Body swapping.
Honestly, also the second season episode with T'Pring. What's that? The one where he becomes human accidentally.
Let's put that one on the list where he's genetically changed to be fully human because the aliens thought they fixed him.
Yeah,
And he
it's
doesn't
really
tell
good.
her in advance, and so he's trying to pretend to be Vulcan, and it's really hard. And he's basically like a young adult who's struggling with his personal identity.
It's great.
Yeah, that's a good one too. The Spock T'Pring episodes are really interesting.
Yeah.
In Strange New Worlds, the way that they either work together or clash together.
I absolutely agree. Yeah. So I guess that's the end. Now you know our top 10 Star Trek episodes, for now at least, because the franchise is still making episodes,
Of course, and if anyone out there wants to share what's on their list or what they thought about our list, feel free to do so. Otherwise, we will see you in our next podcast.
Yeah. Yep. Goodbye, people.